and welcome to another episode of the Number One Comics Podcast. I'm your host, Jonah. With me, as always, is Bill. Bill, welcome back.
Thank you, Jonah.
It feels like it's been a long time.
It does.
But it's only been a week.
Yes.
And we're wearing the exact same clothes that we were wearing last time.
We are. It smells like... No, I'm just
I know.
kidding.
This shirt can stand up by itself, but I'm sure.
Man.
Anyway, we're back with another exciting episode, as I'd mentioned, and tonight we are talking about one of my personal favorite Marvel comic characters.
Oh, yes.
Darkhawk.
I've been waiting for this one.
I know. I don't know why we waited so long to do this, because Darkhawk, Sleepwalker, Ghost Rider, these are like some of my... Moon Knight... These are like my go-to Marvel characters.
Yeah.
Darkhawk in particular, I love just because he works so well as a street-level character, like kind of what we see here as he starts out, and he works well as like a cosmic character. He does. Just so many levels that you can use this guy on.
Yeah.
I'm a huge Darkhawk fan.
Well, this was the first comic that I collected the entire run of.
Was it really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Now, Grant, I've talked before how I collected like X-Men, Spiderman. That stuff's still going on today, obviously. This one, as we'll get into, was kind of for the time, a long but also way too short of a run.
Yeah. Do you still have your Darkhawk comics?
I do.
Nice. I have the full run of it, but I didn't get that until I was like an adult. I just kind of bits and pieces here and there as a kid.
See, I had a friend of mine that showed me number 4.
Yeah.
And I read that and I liked it. I went out the next week and bought number 5 and I liked that, and then we went back and got 1, 2, and 3 later on and continued collecting the series.
I think the first issue of Darkhawk I picked up was 15, maybe. It's whichever one has Ghost Rider on the cover.
Oh yes.
Because if you wanted teenage Jonah to buy a comic, you had to put Ghost Rider on the cover, and I would buy it no matter what comic it was. And so I think that was the first issue of Darkhawk that I picked up, and then I picked up again here and there. I'd pick up a few, but it wasn't until I got into like adulthood that I was like, I got to go back and like get this whole run. Yeah, because I was already, I had already read a lot of Darkhawk in like New Warriors, because I was reading quite a bit of that. And so, I don't know why it took me so long to like go back and pick up his series. I'm glad I did, though.
And funny enough, like months before that Ghost Rider issue with Darkhawk came out, I was like, it would be so sick to see him team up with Ghost Rider. Because like you, if it had Ghost Rider involved in it, I immediately at least had to pick it up and read it.
Yep.
But, yeah.
Maybe they probably heard you say that. They stole your idea.
Yeah.
I would sue.
So this is back before smartphones listened to everything that you said.
Right. This was back before that, because this comic was published in March of 1991 was the cover date on it. Published by Marvel Comics, and cover price of $1.
Yeah.
Man, $1 for a comic.
Those were the good days.
I could buy every comic published if they were still $1.
I know it.
But no, they're like $5 a piece now.
Right.
It's ridiculous. Danny Fingeroth is the writer, and Mike Manley was the artist. The character was actually created by Tom DeFalco and Mike Manley, though Tom DeFalco didn't write any of the Darkhawk. So, in fact, Tom DeFalco mentioned that Marvel was wanting to introduce more new teenage heroes, because the majority of their newsstand readers were teens or preteens. And at the time, you had to think like Spider-Man was, at the time, being phased out of that age range, right? Because he was dating, or he's getting married to Mary Jane around that time.
Yeah.
Wasn't a couple years later, and they had kids or something, right, during the Clone Wars saga. So Spider-Man was no longer that teenage character that the teenage readers, that they felt the teenage readers would resonate with. So they created characters like Sleepwalker. Rick Sheridan was sort of that college age character. Danny Ketch, as Ghost Rider. New Warriors were all, even though a lot of those characters had been around for decades, a lot of those were all still teenagers, right?
Right.
And then Darkhawk was introduced to us as a teen. So DeFalco wanted to write the series himself. He didn't have the time, so he gave that task to Danny Fingeroth. And kind of a rarity these days, or even at the time, Danny, he penned the entire series. Like, he wrote every issue of Darkhawk during its run.
Wow.
Now, in designing Darkhawk, because I want to talk a little bit about this. We don't usually spend a lot of time on character designs. You know, if you think back to last week's episode, you know, Nomad's design, like, there's really not a lot to talk about.
Right.
That's kind of best forgotten.
Right.
But Darkhawk, I think, is one of the coolest designs around. In his design, Mike Manley, he had stated that he'd found inspiration in a drawing that he saw of a hawk-headed figure, like an Egyptian god-type guy. It was a mix of, you know, Captain Marvel and Spider-Man as well, and he also found inspiration in the 70s Namor costume. If you think about the wings that pop out from underneath, that was totally, you know, Namor, which I really like that look for him, as opposed to if they'd given him, you know, like Hawkman wings.
Yeah.
I like this design better.
Yeah.
And his claw grappling hook was clearly inspired by Wolverine's claws, which, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
The first character I ever designed as a kid, his name was Death Shadow. He had Wolverine claws. Like, who didn't have Wolverine claws?
Right.
Back at the time. And I can definitely see all of the inspirations that Manley was recounting, you know, in the design here. Darkhawk himself is a techno-organic construct called a raptor. He possesses enhanced strength, agility, and reflexes. He is powered by an extraterrestrial amulet that's embedded in his chest, and that is it's a seed from the Tree of Shadows in null space, because comics. Because why not?
Of course.
He has retractable wings, which I mentioned briefly, that he can use for flight. Injuries to his body can be repaired by switching back to his human host form, and they can be repaired like pretty much instantly, which I think is very cool. And then he also can fire energy blasts from his amulet, which we actually will see or talk about in this first issue. And then he's got that claw grappling hook weapon thing. So those are just some of his abilities and weapons that he has.
Yeah.
Tell me a little about your thoughts on his design as a whole.
I immediately, that was the first thing I ever noticed about Darkhawk was his design. Immediately was drawn to it. I was like, this guy looks badass.
Yeah.
Like, and I immediately wanted to know more about him. And I think even on the cover of number 4, which we'll kind of get into, you know, his character in Rogue's Gallery and that sort of thing, there was another character who had armor very similar to his on the cover of number 4.
Yep.
I believe it was number 4, number 5, something like that. I can't remember exactly the issue. But I was immediately like, this guy looks badass. He almost looked like a kind of like a Batman Shredder kind of combination there. And immediately, like, the helmet itself I thought was really cool. So of course, that was
he's such a striking design.
Yeah.
It was very much unlike, in my opinion, and I'm trying to think back to, like, you know, Marvel Comics circa 1990. It was very much unlike anything else that their characters looked like at the time.
Very much so.
And it was on this cusp of, our characters are all going to be darker.
Right.
Right? So, like, Darkhawk, Ghost Rider, you even get darker when you get into, like, the Midnight Suns, right? Like the Night Stalkers,
right,
when they made a comeback. And so Marvel was definitely going into, like, darker 90s territory at this time. And so and this character was like one of the kind of the first, you know, entrances into that.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the cover here before we dive into the issue itself. So on the cover, we've got our hero, Darkhawk. He's engaging a group of armed thugs. You can tell that they're bad guys because of the ponytails and trench coats. And on the cover, it says Dawn of the Darkhawk, which is the title of the issue as well. One thing I will note on this is there is no celebrity hero guest star.
There
You
isn't.
don't have Spider-Man popping in here. You don't have... Which I guess if you were going to have a guest star with a title like this, Spider-Man would probably have been the one to do it. But no, this guy's got the whole issue to himself, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So what's going on inside? We open up on our title page with credits, and again, we see Darkhawk on the prowl in the city. However, and that's more of like a pinup than anything else, really.
Right.
Because our story really opens up on the following page with a fantastic looking hobgoblin gliding through the sky. The hobgoblin is meeting a man called Felipe about locating something for him. Now, Felipe advises hobgoblin to be patient and that his agents are following up on a lead. We're not really told what it is a hobgoblin's searching for at this point. Mm-hmm. And Felipe's last name is Basin, and I'm probably just going to call him Basin from here on out because that's easier to say for me than Felipe. Mm-hmm. We then cut to Queens, New York, and an old closed-down amusement park. Now, a few of Basin's agents are hassling an old bum. They believe that what they're looking for is there at the amusement park and that the old man's lying to them. Basin actually pulls up in a car and tries the carrot versus the stick to get the man to talk to him. He hands the old bum a wad of cash and says to call the number on the band after he's finished drinking the money away, and maybe his memory will have improved. The following morning, Assistant District Attorney Grace Powell is running late for court. A man approaches her with an envelope of cash as a bribery. She swats it away, telling the man to tell his boss to keep his threats and his money to himself. That evening, Grace arrives home, and she's waiting on her husband. He's a police officer. She's waiting on him to get home from his shift, and it's running late. So she's a little worried. Her son, Chris, along with his younger brothers, Jonathan and Jason, are trying to reassure her that Dad's okay and he'll be home soon. Much to her relief, her husband, Mike, does come in through the back door, and she tells him that she feared Basin may have done something and that she was threatened by one of his goons earlier that day. So we find out that just from that the bad guy we've already met, this Felipe Basin, is the same guy who's looking for something that Hobgoblin wants, and he's threatening this assistant district attorney. Chris watches on as his parents chat, and he wishes there was something that he could do. He just feels a little helpless. His dad advises against wishing his life away and, be a kid. Soon after, at dinner, the younger brother's Jason reminds his dad that he would take him and John to the old Wonderland amusement park before it was torn down entirely. The dad responds that they'll do it that weekend if he doesn't have to work overtime. However, by Sunday afternoon, both Mom and Dad are working, and the brothers are pestering Chris to take them to the amusement park. But Chris promised his mom that they wouldn't leave the house. There's a ring at the doorbell, and at the door are two of Chris's friends, Jean and Rebecca. And they want Chris to join him for a quick soda at is it Jasel's? I think it's like Jasols, Jasel's. Mm-hmm. I don't know what Jasel's is. I'm not sure what kind of name that is. Anyway, Chris tells his brothers that he'll be back with milkshakes for him. You know what I think that was? I think they were going to call it Jason's, and they're like, well, we've already got a kid in this named Jason.
Yeah, so like, change the letter. Anyway,
after a ad for the Silver Surfer Nintendo game, in which a contestant would win a customized Silver Surfer jet ski, I want to mention this because I have to wonder if anyone ever actually won those contests.
Right.
Who won that jet ski? Do they still have it to this day? And if they did win it but never used it and this thing is in mint condition, what is that worth?
Right.
These are questions that inquiring minds want to know.
Definitely.
Anyway, back to the story. We cut to Chris's mom exclaiming that her babies were gone. So the last scene of the story, Chris is heading off with his friends, leaving the brothers behind. After this awesome Silver Surfer ad, Chris's mom's exclaiming that her babies are gone. She tells Chris, because he's arriving at home and he finds his mom frantic, she tells him that they've been kidnapped by Basin. However, Chris thinks that he knows where they went. Chris goes to the closed-down amusement park where he questions the bum. The guy says he saw the two kids go into the funhouse. Chris goes after them. The old man, called St. Johnny, looks deep into his bottle and wonders why he would give this young man information he wouldn't sell days before for $1,000, is his thought. Or somebody's thought. I don't know if that's the old man narrating that or somebody else. Mm-hmm. Anyway, inside the funhouse, Chris finds his brothers. They hear someone coming and snoop to find their dad with a few other guys. Not in a sexual way, mind you. They're just chatting. The guys are paying Officer Powell $50,000. However, after being insulted, Powell shoves the bad guy and attempts to run away as another man fires on him. The cop gets hit in the head with a pistol and he goes down unconscious. One of the twins cries out for their father, which alerts the bad guys to them being there. The kid is grabbed by the bad guy. Now, before the bad guy, because he's literally attempting to like shoot this kid in the head, before the bad guy can shoot the innocent child, Chris leaps onto him. The twins and their older brother make a run for it, but they fall through the floor. They look for a way out, but the bad guys are right onto them. Chris shoves his brothers into a closet and starts throwing whatever he can, whatever he can get his hands on at them. He then tips a metal shelving unit towards them to kind of get them away from him. Behind the shelving unit, Chris searches for anything that he can use as a weapon. Instead, he finds a small amulet. Grabbing it, he is immediately transformed into the armor-clad Darkhawk. Chris can feel the power surging through his body. He believes, actually, that he's dreaming. The bad guys get up. An energy blast bursts from Darkhawk's chest, and he tosses the shelving unit at them, then flips out of the way of them trying to return fire. Darkhawk warns the bad guys they've invaded the lair of Edgeman, and the three kids are in his protection. I don't really know what any of that means. I mean, I don't really know what Edgeman is, but... Okay.
Well, so... prior to this, he said he needed something to give him an edge.
Yes, that's right. That is his own superhero name.
So he gives himself the name Edgeman.
I'm glad that someone else told him that is not his name.
Right.
Because when I read that, I was like, "Fucking Edgeman." I was like, "Who is this?"
We probably wouldn't still be talking about Edgeman all these years later.
No, Edgeman would not have made it for what did Darkhawk run, like 48.
It's 50 issues.
50 issues, yeah. Edgeman would not have made it that far. Yeah. Anyway, it's not convincing as the bad guys rush him. They're not afraid of Edgeman. One tries to get Darkhawk with a garrote, but he tosses them aside like they weigh nothing. One of the thugs grabs an electrical wire and attempts to execute Darkhawk. Electrocute, I guess would be a better word.
Right.
Tries to electrocute Darkhawk. Another energy blast from his chest, but he misses. The thug recognizes that Darkhawk has the power the Hobgoblin and his boss have been searching for. As the thug tries to fry him, Darkhawk leaps away and the guy electrocutes himself instead. Darkhawk ties up the two remaining bad guys as his brothers bang on the closet door to be let out. Chris glances in a mirror, seeing himself as Darkhawk for the first time. He grabs the amulet in his chest and he transforms back into Chris. He tosses the amulet aside. Why would you ever toss that thing to the side?
I don't know.
Put that in your pocket, bro.
Yeah, exactly.
Before letting the twins out of the closet, he goes to find his dad. He asks his dad if what he witnessed was what it looked like. His dad is like, "Listen, man, take care of your mom and the kids for me. I gotta go." And then he runs off. That's kind of a bitch move. Chris lets his brothers out of the closet and they go to leave. But on the way out, he does pick the amulet back up, thinking that while his dad couldn't live up to his own ideals, it doesn't mean that he can't, if he doesn't get himself killed first. A few days later, Chris returns to the amusement park, but it is being demolished. The bum behind him rattles off, "Power's got to be used, not abused, by Darkhawk." Chris turns to the man, but he's gone. A few days later, at the Powell house, the twins are fighting. A phone call startles the mom, as it is someone threatening one of her children if she doesn't lay off Bazin. Chris decides to use the amulet to turn back into Darkhawk. Hobgoblin meets with Bazin. Bazin informs him that what he seeks is buried below tons of debris at the amusement park. That's where Hobgoblin will start, and he'll kill anyone that gets in his way. To be continued.
Wow.
Thoughts on a first issue?
Oh, man. Kid me was stoked.
Yeah. Was this like taking you back to
oh my gosh.
childhood?
This was, going back and reading this was a phenomenal experience for me.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we're talking about this, because it's still, to this day, is one of my favorite #1 issues and one of my favorite characters.
Yep. I agree with you about both of those things. And there are always certain tropes when it comes to a typical superhero origin story. Ordinary person, a triggering event, the acquisition of power, and a turning point. Do they embrace their power? Do they let it go? Blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, the villain, right? And there are several... there's several other aspects of it, that we haven't really touched on in this issue.
Right.
Finding a mentor, maintaining the secret identity, becoming a symbol, learning how to use the power, etc. This does touch on a number of those tropes. But it's following those tropes is why it works so well as a first issue. Right? Chris is a normal kid. He wants to do more. He learns that his dad isn't the man that he thought he was. He finds the amulet, which transforms him into Darkhawk. He saves his brothers. He initially tosses it aside, thinking he wants nothing to do with it, but then ends up picking it back up. And we're introduced to a few villains. Felipe Bazin and Hobgoblin.
Right.
One of the first things that I want to point out on this is, and it's really important with any first issue, is you got to get drawn in pretty much right away, especially when it's a brand new character. We think of a few weeks ago when we talked about X.
Yeah.
A few weeks ago in their time. When we talked about X and how, you've got what's drawn you in essentially is just the look of the character, right? You've got kind of that cool splash. He's getting ready. You got that cool splash page. But you've got to have something that captures your attention right away.
Yeah.
This does that. I'm not even talking about the kind of pinup first page. I'm talking about that page of Hobgoblin flying through the city is dope.
Yes.
Hobgoblin has never looked better. And he always looks cool. But he's never looked better than that piece of art right there.
This was during one of my favorite times of Hobgoblin, too, is when he was still possessed by... I forget the name of the demon. It was like Zaratoth or something weird like that, comics stuff.
Was that what ended up splitting off eventually and becoming Demogoblin?
Yes.
Okay.
So this was like, this is why he had the long tongue, the fangs, kind of looking like a cross between, well, you'd probably normally see Hobgoblin looking like, and like Venom or something like that. So that part alone is really cool. Of course, he's in New York. We all know who's in New York.
Yep.
Spider-Man.
Yep.
So, of course, he's going to have a crossover with Spider-Man at some point, which he does in the very next issue.
Yep.
But yeah, I think as far as a hook, we all know, if you know Marvel at this point, you know Hobgoblin.
Yep.
You're like, why is he meeting with this guy? What's going on? What does this have to do with the character you see on the cover?
Well, and I think it's smart too to give us an existing antagonist that readers know,
right?
Versus trying to introduce us to a brand new antagonist. Like, introduce us to the hero and then you have him fight somebody that's existing, I think makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Than trying to introduce a bad guy at the same time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that they really succeed in kind of bringing you into the story right away. Plus, we meet the Powells. They're your seemingly ordinary family. Marvel wanted to create, an angsty teenage boy that their readers could relate to, and I think they did that with Chris. I think they succeeded.
Yeah.
He's not brilliant. He's not a prodigy. He's just a regular kid who wants the ability to do more than what he thinks that he actually can.
Yeah.
And then he becomes Darkhawk. And Darkhawk is dope, period. I mean, that's all there is to say about that. Like we've said numerous times already, his outfit is cool. His abilities are cool. When I was a kid, if I wished I could have been a superhero, it would have been something like Darkhawk.
Yeah.
A Darkhawk adjacent, maybe. So yeah, we've talked about, he's among one of my top 5 favorite Marvel heroes. Alongside Moon Knight, Nova, Ghost Rider, Death's Head 2, Darkhawk. I mean, he's definitely my top 5.
Yeah.
The artwork throughout is good. I mean, it's that late 80s or early 90s, stock Marvel artwork, but that's not a bad thing.
Well, and this was a time too where, like we said at the beginning, with them kind of going a little bit darker towards this period of comics, they were starting to get away from that like 2-color palette, bright colored outfits like you saw with Spider-Man, or like you'd see with Superman or something like that.
Yep. Yeah. The monotone aspect of it is really one, it's befitting of the character itself.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's definitely visually striking, and it's angular, but it's one of those that's like easy enough for them to draw repeatedly and looks good from different angles. I was thinking that, in terms of the artwork overall, especially when you get into the action sequences, it's way easier to follow this than it was the last episode when we talked about Nomad and how kind of convoluted that became towards the end and trying to figure out what was going on.
Yeah. This
was much easier and more concise to follow. So the art was definitely a plus up on that. Yeah. If I do wish we would have gotten more Hobgoblin in this.
Yeah.
He's really only in like 2 scenes. But I really would have liked to have seen, and I know you're building up to it, I would have liked to have seen actual like Hobgoblin and Darkhawk together or face off in this. And maybe, again, maybe too early in the series for that to have happened. Maybe you got to build that up, right, to where maybe he gets a little bit of confidence and he gets his ass whooped on by Hobgoblin would be cool. I know Spider-Man and Hobgoblin do appear more in the next issue. But I would have liked more of Hobgoblin in this. I get the build-up, though. If I had just been reading this for the first time, I would have definitely picked up the next issue.
Yeah.
So, what other thoughts did you have on the issue?
Very much like, I think the thing you want to do well in a number one issue is leave people wanting more and make them want to come back.
Yep.
And I think you got, with so many of like the 90s stories, they're so like quick, expedition dump, boom, character and costume, not a whole lot said. I think they said a lot with as little as they did.
Yep.
And like I said at the beginning, this is one that I collected all the way through the entire run. So, I was a huge fan right off the bat.
For sure. In terms of what came next, it did run for 50 issues. It ended in March of 95, which I was largely out of comics by then anyway.
Starting to get there
at that time
myself, yeah.
Aside from this series, he also appeared in an issue of Quasar. He appeared in Sleepwalker and the New Warriors, which I'd mentioned before. He was also in the there was another one that I was just thinking of. It'll come to me. Anyway, he made his appearance. Oh, that's what it was. The round robin story arc from Amazing Spider-Man. He appeared in that story arc as well. He did have a role in Volume 2 of Runaways, kind of later on in the timeline, and then he was also in a short-lived series called The Loners.
I liked The Loners.
The Loners was cool. It was offbeat. It was cool.
Another character we might at some point get to was Phil Urich, who's the heroic Green Goblin.
Yep.
I was really surprised because, like, number one, I wanted to read it because Chris Powell was in it. The Loners is basically like a support group for teenage superheroes.
Yes. It was kind of an offshoot of Runaways, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was, some New Warriors involved in there. Phil Urich's Green Goblin.
Yep.
I mean, this is after they've all, like, kind of, most of them, I think, have lost their powers, or some of them don't have them anymore.
Stopped being superheroes at that point. Right.
So it was really kind of cool.
Yeah,
it was kind of like
it was a cool offbeat story. We'll probably talk about that at some point because I dig that one.
Yeah.
He did later appear in the late 2000s. He was featured kind of on a cosmic level, which, again, we talked very early on in this episode that he works so well, not only at a street level, but at a cosmic level as well. Mm-hmm. In titles like Nova, and then he took part in the War of Kings event. So over 30 or so years almost, Powell as Darkhawk has evolved from that street level with zero experience to essentially a cosmic level badass.
Yeah. He's even joined the Guardians of the Galaxy at one point.
Yep. There was a short miniseries in 2021 called Darkhawk Heart of the Hawk. And that was kind of like Chris Powell's swan song. And it kind of brought Chris Powell's story to a close. And then later that year, they introduced a new teenager, Darkhawk, that had popped up in the armor. And I don't really think we've seen a lot of him since that. But, one thing that I think, and I know, you can probably talk about it a little more than I can. One thing that I think had hurt Darkhawk overall, especially in his first run, was, again, a lack of true, cool adversaries. He had Hobgoblin, he had Tombstone, there was Venom. He did fight Portal.
Yes.
Which was a teleporter, right?
Portal was the one I was talking about before that had the Darkhawk armor.
Yep.
Basically, Portal was, like, predates Darkhawk quite a bit, from what I understand, but I was never really familiar with him. It's basically a mutant that can create portals.
Okay, so he's an existing character.
Right.
Okay.
So he ran away to another dimension where he found a guy wearing Darkhawk armor that was dead. He basically took it off of him and used all that. But yeah, I mean, there wasn't a lot of Darkhawk originating villains that he faced.
Yeah. You had Evil Hawk.
Yeah, which
was really Darkhawk painted red.
Yeah.
And a bit bulkier armor.
But I mean, when you think about it, though, every superhero has that. They have that evil, flip side to them. I think
Evil Hawk's even been, like, retconned from existence at the point. I don't think he's even a thing.
Yeah. Anymore. See, that was the thing when they got into, like, the War of Kings and all that stuff. They retconned a lot of Darkhawk's origins.
Yeah.
They basically made Evil Hawk like a split personality of Chris Powell,
right?
Which was really weird because how did he kick his own ass? But I don't know. The one original villain that he did have that I liked, which was pretty much just like a female Magneto, was Lodestone, and it was like a minion of Philippe Bazin, who kind of became like his Lex Luthor.
Gotcha. All right.
For an extent, but
so to close this out, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
All right. I'll give you a few seconds. What Marvel villain would you have pit Darkhawk against in an effort to create a new arch rivalry?
Ooh.
Like I said, I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you who I probably would have put him up against at some point, who would have been like Kang the Conqueror or somebody a little more beefy than the street level stuff.
So you're thinking cosmically, is what you'd put him up against.
This is another one of those retcon things that I really hated about it, what they did. But they basically made it so that he was the Raptors were designed to be used against the Phoenix Force.
Yeah.
Which was just stupid.
Yep.
Because I think the less connection you have to the X-Men, the better.
Yes, especially
for a standalone character like this. I would have loved to see him take on like some of the big cosmic level threats, which I know he kind of dipped his toe into a little bit.
Yep.
Seeing him go up against like Doctor Doom or somebody that was a little more like genius level, not just I want your amulet, give it to me, would have been cool. I did like his rivalry with Venom. That was kind of unique because it was when Venom was still marooned on or self-exiled on this island.
Right.
But yeah, as far as somebody he never fought, I don't know. That's a tough one.
I told you I was going to put you on the spot.
That's a tough one because I could think of 100, just like his team up with Ghost Rider. I could think of 100 people I'd love to see him go up against.
Yeah, in terms of from a cosmic standpoint, I think it would have been cool to see him go up against maybe like the Shi'ar, like the Imperial Guard, Darkhawk versus Gladiator.
Oh yeah,
would be kind of like a badass. And I love Gladiator, and he's not necessarily a bad guy, but that doesn't mean they can't be on like opposing sides and beat the shit out of one another.
Right.
I think that would have been very cool. If from a kind of a starting out like street level, like who I would put him up against, it is a tough one. And I did like the idea of kind of pulling from like the Spidey villain pool because Spidey's got a lot of rogues. And he can't fight all of them. So, have him go up against like, and maybe he did. Again, it's been a long time for me since I've read a lot of those issues, but have him go up against like Cardiac or Scorpion.
Yeah.
I think that would have
been cool. I know a lot of what they were trying to do with the initial 50 issue run was boost popularity.
Yeah.
That's why not even, I forget when it was he got the redesign that I didn't like. I didn't think it was nearly as cool as his original design, which I think they've reversed it.
They've gone back to that, back closer to it. Yeah.
But he did a lot of team ups during his time. Like he teamed up with, there's one where he teamed up with Captain America and Daredevil to fight the UFOs.
Yep.
There was another one where he teamed up with Moon Knight, Nova, and some other people.
I got I don't remember what it's called. I actually just got it in the mail the other day. But it's an Amazing Spider-Man on the title. It's a number 1, but it's Amazing Spider-Man and Nova and Darkhawk together.
Yeah.
That's I think is again they were trying to push his popularity by having other popular characters at the time guest star with him, as opposed to letting him breathe on his own and give him a really cool villain to go up against.
Yeah, which I do kind of appreciate that in the second issue that Spider-Man is in it, just for the sake of Spider-Man's at that point now where he's not the angsty teenager like you said.
Yeah.
And he kind of was
he could play the mentor role, right? He could play the mentor role, which is another one of those
because
tropes.
Because Darkhawk almost straight up murders Hobgoblin in the second one, which is kind of cool, but at the same time it was kind of like Spider-Man's standing right there, he's not going to let it happen.
Right.
He did have like stuff with the Punisher. I think he interacted with the Punisher at one point.
Yep.
But yeah, I like, don't get me wrong, I like everything that they did with him, with all the team ups and stuff like that, but I would love to see him do a new run with him.
And I'd like to see him bring back Chris Powell.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. He's no longer the angsty teenager. And so maybe it would make sense to have a new Darkhawk, but I just am more of a fan of kind of those originals versus some of the legacy characters that Marvel introduces us to. But yeah, I'd love to see Darkhawk make a big comeback and get a series.
Yeah.
I'd love to write a Darkhawk series. That'd be awesome. So give us the job. Marvel. You put out so much garbage as it is. Let us put out some garbage. Excellent. Well, I definitely would recommend this. I love this issue. I love this character. So be sure to check it out if you haven't already. Thanks for checking out this episode as well. Yeah. As I'd mentioned at the very beginning, like and subscribe. Follow Bill's instructions to find us. It was way more concise than mine.
Yes.
Find us on Facebook as well. Special thanks to everyone at the Field of Geeks Network for helping make this happen. Thanks to Raven X for the theme song. Thanks to all of you for tuning in, and we will see you guys next time. For Bill, I'm Jonah, and I hope you guys have a great night.